My husband abandoned me in a foreign country like trash, but a year later, I got my revenge in a way that made him regret it for the rest of his life. I never thought the man who vowed to love me until the end of our days could turn into a monster in mere seconds. My husband, Daniel, and his friends thought it would be funny to leave me alone in a small French town after an argument. "Let's see how she gets out of this one." He laughed as he got behind the wheel, but when he found me a year later in Greece, I had started a new life, and our encounter became his worst nightmare. "See how our princess handles this without us!" Daniel's voice echoed in the evening air as he slammed the car door shut. The red taillights of our rental car grew smaller, disappearing around the bend of a narrow French street, leaving only dust and the echo of his friend's laughter. I stood frozen, my mouth still open mid-sentence. The argument we'd had outside a small cafe suddenly felt utterly insignificant compared to his unthinkable act. "He'll come back," I whispered to myself, drawing curious glances from locals enjoying their dinners at open-air tables. "This is just to scare me." But the knot in my stomach tightened as minutes stretched into an hour, and the sky darkened over the unfamiliar town whose name I couldn't even pronounce properly. Before I continue, I want to thank each of you for being part of this journey. If you're drawn to stories of women finding strength in unexpected places after betrayal, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps support more stories of resilience and rebirth. Now let's see how one abandoned woman turned an act of cruelty into the start of her freedom. When I begged Daniel not to drink so much at lunch, I never imagined it would escalate this far. His friends, old college buddies celebrating their annual guys' trip, which I was reluctantly invited to, egged him on when I suggested heading back to the hotel. "She's always controlling you, man," Ryan said, ordering another round as I stood to leave. When Daniel followed me outside, his words were slurred but his anger precise. The argument quickly turned ugly, years of pent-up resentment spilling out from both sides. "You've got your purse with your passport, right?" he taunted, sliding into the driver's seat. "Daniel, don't you dare! Don't even think about it!" I shouted, but he was already starting the engine. "Then figure it out yourself. You're so smart, always telling me what to do." Night had fully fallen when the reality hit me. I counted my cash, €95 and $42. Not enough for a ticket home, barely enough for a night in a cheap hotel. My credit cards were in Daniel's wallet. He'd offered to carry them when my small purse became too full. I found the cheapest boarding house I could, a grimy room above a bakery with a narrow bed and a sink in the corner. The elderly woman who showed me the room didn't speak English, but seemed to understand my situation, patting my hand sympathetically. "He blocked me," I whispered in disbelief, staring at my phone. 34 calls to Daniel, all sent straight to voicemail. Text delivered, no reply. I tried Ryan, then Josh, then every friend of Daniel's who was in that car. All had blocked me. A shiver ran through me as I realized this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment impulse, but a calculated humiliation. Sleep came in fits, interrupted by hope for a call and fresh waves of panic. By morning, I convinced myself the nightmare would end. Daniel would return, apologize, but be ready to blame me for overreacting to his joke. I'd be angry, but relieved enough to move on, back to our carefully curated life in Boston, where he was a respected architect and I was the supportive wife who'd put her own interior design career on hold to manage our home and social calendar. But he didn't come. On the second day, I rationed my remaining money, buying only a sandwich for lunch, circling the town's perimeter, checking every hotel and restaurant for any sign of our tour group. By evening, I realized they'd moved on to their planned itinerary, heading to Lyon without me. On the third day, a kind cafe owner who noticed me loitering outside his establishment offered a free espresso and, in broken English, gave me directions to the local police station. The officer there didn't seem surprised by my story, as if abandoned tourists were a common occurrence. But his limited English and my non-existent French left me with only a filed report and a sympathetic nod. That day, I made the hardest decision of my life. Standing in front of a cramped pawn shop window, I slipped off my wedding ring, a 2-carat diamond Daniel had given me for our 5th anniversary, replacing the modest band we'd started with. "Vous êtes sûr?" the pawnbroker asked, seeing my tears. "Yes," I replied, though my heart broke. "I'm sure." He offered far less than the ring was worth, but enough to fund the next leg of my journey, wherever it might lead. "America? Call family?" the pawnbroker suggested, counting out euros. I nodded mechanically, but inside, a different plan was forming. Family meant explanations, meant hearing, "I told you so" from my mom about Daniel's character, meant facing friends who'd seen the cracks in our marriage I'd tried so hard to conceal. The bus station was quiet when I arrived. Its digital board displayed destinations I'd only read about in travel magazines. Overnight bus to Paris, connections to ferries, other buses to places Daniel and his friends wouldn't think to look for me, if they even bothered to try. My finger hovered over my dad's name in my contacts. One call, and he'd wire money for a ticket home. One call, and I'd be back in the life I'd built, where I'd slowly made myself smaller to accommodate Daniel's growing ego and demands. A memory surfaced. Daniel jokingly hiding my portfolio when I mentioned returning to interior design work. "Why complicate things?" he'd asked. "We don't need the money, and I need you to focus on our life." I'd laughed it off then, but sitting in that grimy station, I saw it for what it was. Another fence in the corral he'd built around me. "Where are you headed?" the ticket agent asked. An older woman with kind eyes who'd watched me stare at the departure board for 20 minutes. "Greece," I replied, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. "The farthest coastal village you can get me to." 14 hours later, I stepped off the final bus of my journey, my body stiff from uncomfortable seats and tension. The smell of sea air and olive groves greeted me as I surveyed the whitewashed buildings of a village whose name I couldn't pronounce. My phone battery had died somewhere between countries, my stomach was empty from hunger, and the weight of what I'd done, or what had been done to me, pressed on my shoulders. Exhaustion blurred the edges of my vision as I trudged toward what seemed like the town's center. 3 days of emotional overload left me raw, cycling between rage at Daniel, fear of an uncertain future, and a strange, unexpected flicker of something dangerously close to liberation. My remaining euros would cover maybe 2 nights in the cheapest room I could find. After that, I had no plan, no friends, no knowledge of the local language beyond please and thank you. But as I watched the sunset paint the Aegean waters gold and pink, a calm I hadn't felt in years settled over me. Daniel wanted to teach me a lesson about dependence. Instead, he'd accidentally set me free. The Greek sun beat down mercilessly as I wandered farther from the village. My feet blistered in impractical sandals meant for sightseeing, not hiking. My water bottle had run dry hours ago, and the combination of dehydration, hunger, and emotional exhaustion made the world spin around me. Silvery green trees lined the dusty path, their leaves glinting like coins in the breeze. Olive groves, I vaguely realized, before my knees buckled beneath me. The ground rushed up, but I barely felt the impact. Darkness clouded my vision as an odd calm washed over me. Maybe this was a fitting end. Abandoned by my husband in one foreign country, only to collapse alone in another. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the exhaustion that had been building since Daniel drove away.
Theos mukorizi!
A woman's voice cut through my haze, followed by weathered hands rolling me over. An elderly face came into focus, deep lines framing kind eyes wide with concern. She spoke rapidly in Greek, patting my cheeks and offering a flask. The water revived me enough to sit up, though my head still spun fiercely. She introduced herself as Maria, repeating her name and pointing to herself. I weakly mimicked her gesture. Samantha. Maria helped me to my feet, her small frame surprisingly strong as she supported my weight. She pointed to a stone farmhouse nestled among the olive trees and made walking motions with her fingers. I nodded, too weak to resist, as she guided me slowly up the hill. The farmhouse kitchen greeted me with the scent of herbs hanging from wooden beams and something hearty simmering on an ancient stove. Maria sat me at a worn wooden table before calling out to someone. A male voice responded, and a moment later, an older man with a weathered face and silver mustache appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag. Costas, Maria said, pointing to him. Her husband nodded cautiously at me, his eyes questioning but not unkind. Maria poured cool water into a glass and pressed it into my hands, then served a bowl of simple soup. My stomach growled loudly as the aroma hit my nose, earning a smile from Maria. That evening passed in a blur of halting communication. I tried to explain my situation through a mix of limited words, gestures, and eventually tears. Maria nodded as if she understood completely, though I knew she couldn't grasp the details. Kostas remained quiet but attentive, occasionally asking questions that Maria translated with gestures. They offered me their spare room, a simple space with whitewashed walls and a narrow bed covered with a handmade quilt. Too exhausted to protest, I collapsed into much-needed sleep. Morning arrived with rooster crows and the scent of fresh bread. I found clean clothes folded at the foot of my bed, a simple cotton dress and cardigan, decades old but freshly laundered. They hung loosely on my frame, but offered a welcome change from my worn travel outfit. In the kitchen, Maria beamed at the sight of me, immediately serving strong coffee and fresh bread with olive oil and honey. In the clarity of daylight, embarrassment crept in. These strangers had taken me in without question, fed me, clothed me. I needed to explain myself, offer payment, move on. Through broken English and a translation app on my now charged phone, thanks to an adapter Kostas produced, I tried to express my gratitude and intent to return to the village. Maria's face fell immediately. She shook her head vigorously, pointing to the street where rain now pattered against the windows, then to my still blistered feet. Stay, she insisted, one of the few English words she knew. Rest. Over the next 3 days, I made several attempts to leave, each met with gentle resistance. Once, with my purse in hand and shoes on, Maria intercepted me at the door, her expression so wounded that guilt washed over me. She took my hand and led me to a small wooden box on the mantel, opening it to reveal photographs. Her fingers trembled as she pointed to a young woman with Maria's eyes and Kostas's smile. Sophia, she said softly, then pointed far away. Australia. Her eyes filled with tears as she made a cradling motion, then held her hand at waist height, indicating a child. "Grandchild," she managed in English, pointing to a newer photo of a baby. "No see." I understood then. Maria saw me as a surrogate for her absent daughter, a presence to fill the empty space left behind. Instead of feeling manipulated, my heart ached for her loss. I nodded slowly and returned my purse to the hook by the door. Each day brought new routines as I gradually integrated into their farm life. Maria taught me how to collect eggs from the chickens without startling them, how to hang laundry so the mountain breeze caught it just right. Costa showed me how to spot weeds among the vegetable garden, his patience evident when I mistakenly pulled a herb the first time. The work was physical, unlike my carefully curated life in Boston, but satisfying in ways I'd forgotten existed. My body, accustomed to designer gyms and measured workouts, protested at first. New calluses formed on my hands, and muscles I didn't know existed ached every evening. But each day, the pain lessened and my strength grew. More importantly, the constant mental churn of my abandonment began to fade, replaced by simpler concerns of farm tasks and language learning. At night, sitting on the small veranda while Maria knitted and Costa smoked his pipe, I found myself experiencing moments of peace. The betrayal still cut deeply, but here, surrounded by ancient olive trees and the rhythm of rural life, it began to feel less like the end of my story and more like an unexpected chapter. 2 weeks after my arrival, Maria sat beside me as we shelled peas from the garden. She studied my face, her expression thoughtful, before asking slowly in her improving English, "Home. You want go home?" She made an airplane motion with her hand, then pointed toward America. The question hit me with unexpected force. Home. The word conjured our elegant Boston townhouse with its designer furniture and meticulously coordinated decor. It also brought Daniel's controlling behavior into sharp focus, his helpful management of our finances that left me with no independent access, his subtle discouragement of my friendships, his dismissal of my career aspirations. Tears streamed down my cheeks as words poured out in a language Maria couldn't fully understand. But the emotion transcended the barrier. I told her about Daniel's betrayal, the years of slowly surrendering pieces of myself to keep the peace, the humiliation of being abandoned like an unwanted bag in a foreign country. Maria's weathered hand covered mine as I spoke. When I finished, she pointed to her heart, then to the farm around us, and finally to me. The message was clear. I had a place here if I wanted it. "Work," I said cautiously, mimicking Costas tending the olive trees. "I stay. I work." Maria's smile bloomed like a sunrise over the Aegean. She nodded, squeezing my hand, before returning to the peas as if we'd just settled something as simple as tomorrow's menu, not a complete redirection of my life. My decision to stay marked the start of my education in olive farming. The next morning, Maria woke me while stars still dotted the sky, handing me work clothes and sturdy boots that had belonged to Sophia. Half asleep, I followed her and Costas into the grove, where the first hint of dawn barely illuminated the ancient trees. "Elias," Maria said, pointing to the fruit-laden branches. She demonstrated the proper technique, gently raking the branches with wooden combs to release olives onto nets spread below. My first attempt sent a shower of twigs and leaves down with the precious olives, earning a patient correction from Costas. By mid-morning, the sun blazed overhead, my shoulders burned with effort, and my city-soft hands earned their first calluses. Boston lady hands? Maria teased gently, inspecting my palms during a lunch break. She disappeared into the house, returning with a homemade salve that smelled of herbs and beeswax. The cooling relief was immediate as she rubbed it into my raw skin. "Tomorrow better," she promised, and surprisingly, she was right. Each day brought improvement. My technique refined, my strength built, my hands toughened. Within weeks, I could work alongside them for hours without complaint, taking pride in the growing piles of harvested fruit. The sorting process proved even more demanding than the harvest. Sitting at a long table under the shade of a pergola, we meticulously separated olives by quality, perfect ones for premium oil, slightly bruised for second grade, damaged ones for soap making. Maria watched me hawk-eyed at first, correcting my mistakes with gentle nudges. Gradually, her corrections grew less frequent as my eye developed for subtle differences.
You learn fast,
Costas commented one evening, his broken English improving alongside my rudimentary Greek. It was the highest compliment he'd paid me, and warmth spread through my chest at his approval. My education extended beyond the groves into Maria's kitchen, a place that initially intimidated me with its lack of modern conveniences. In Boston, I'd considered myself a decent cook, capable of following magazine recipes for dinner parties that impressed Daniel's colleagues. But Maria's cooking involved no measuring cups or precise temperatures, only generations of knowledge passed through hands and observation. "Look," she'd say, kneading bread dough with practiced motions. I mimicked her movements, failing at first. My initial loaves came out dense as rocks, but Maria only laughed, turning them into breadcrumbs for the chickens. Gradually, I learned to feel the dough, to know when it was ready, when it needed more flour or water. The hands-on work became a meditation. Months of tension and control dissolved into simple, repetitive motions, kneading dough, harvesting olives, weeding the garden. For the first time in years, my thoughts didn't revolve around Daniel's plans, his moods, his needs. By the end of the second month, the mirror in the small bathroom showed me an unfamiliar woman. My city pale hands were tanned and strong, adorned with honest calluses. The face that had hidden behind expensive makeup for years now glowed with natural health from outdoor work. Hair once styled to the latest trends was now braided simply for practicality. Designer clothes had long given way to simple cotton dresses and work pants. But the biggest change was within. The constant tension in my shoulders was gone. Smiles came easily without calculation. Laughter sounded genuine for the first time in years. "Beautiful," Maria said one evening as we sat on the veranda, watching the sunset. She touched my face, then her heart. "Inside, beautiful." I understood what she meant. Not the beauty Daniel valued, carefully maintained, artificial, existing for his pleasure. This was a beauty that came from purpose, from belonging, from being myself for the first time in years. Our first olive oil harvest was a revelation. Watching the golden liquid flow from the ancient press, I felt a pride that had nothing to do with external approval. This was something I'd created with my hands, the fruit of months of patient labor. Costas insisted I taste it first. The oil was grassy, peppery, alive in a way I'd never experienced with store-bought versions. It told a story of sun, soil, and countless hours of care. "Good?" he asked, though his smile suggested he knew the answer. "Perfect," I replied, and meant it. That evening, we celebrated with a simple meal: fresh bread, our new oil, tomatoes from the garden, goat cheese from neighbors. No elaborate dishes, no impressive wines, no attempts to impress. Just honest food shared with people who'd become my family. 11 months after I was abandoned, I was working in the grove when I heard an unfamiliar sound. Expensive car tires on the gravel road. Visitors were rare in our remote corner, and I straightened, squinting at the dust cloud. A black BMW pulled up near the house, and my heart stopped. Daniel stepped out, his expensive clothes out of place amidst the farm's simplicity. He looked older, thinner, with lines of stress I didn't remember. 2 unfamiliar men in suits followed, private investigators I later learned. They spoke to Maria, who pointed in my direction. Daniel started walking toward me, each step stirring memories of that humiliating day. But strangely, the fear I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt a calm born of months of hard work and self-discovery.
"Samantha,"
he said as he approached. His voice sounded uncertain, lacking the commanding authority I remembered.
"My God, you look different."
I set down my olive basket and met his gaze. "Daniel, what are you doing here?"
"I came to take you home,"
he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him.
"It was awful. A huge mistake. I was drunk, angry. Your family's been going crazy with worry."
He reached out as if to touch me, but I stepped back. The movement was instinctive, but it spoke louder than words.
"My family?" I repeated. "You mean the parents you lied to? The ones you told I decided to stay in Europe to extend my vacation?"
His face flushed.
"They wouldn't have believed the truth. It sounded insane, even to me."
"The truth," I said slowly.
"You mean the truth about abandoning your wife in a foreign country with no money, no way to contact you, no way to get home?"
Daniel glanced around the simple farm, his expression a mix of disgust and confusion.
"You're living here? In this shack? What's happened to you?"
"I found myself," I replied simply.
"This isn't you,"
he insisted.
"The real you loves nice things, fine restaurants. Our home. Remember our home? I kept it exactly the way you loved it."
Memories flooded back. Hours spent perfectly arranging every pillow, every piece of art, every flower to match his vision of our perfect life. I thought it was our choice, but now I saw it for what it was: another way to control. "You remember hiding my portfolio?" I asked. His face showed a flicker of guilt.
"I just thought we were happy. Why complicate things?"
"We?" I echoed.
"Or were you happy having a wife who existed only to make your life convenient?"
Maria appeared beside us, carrying a tray of water. She offered a glass to Daniel with cautious politeness, but I saw the protective set of her shoulders.
"Who's this woman?"
Daniel asked, not even thanking her for the water.
"My family,"
I replied, and saw his face twist in shock.
"Family? Samantha, you can't be serious. These are peasants. They probably don't even speak English."
The contempt in his voice ignited something in me.
"These peasants picked me up when I was down. They fed me when I was starving. They gave me a home when my own husband abandoned me like trash."
Daniel paled.
"I looked for you. I hired these people."
He gestured to the investigators.
"I spent thousands of dollars trying to find you."
"When?" I asked. "When did you start looking?"
"A day? A week?
A month?"
His silence was telling. "It took me 3 months," he finally admitted. I thought you'd contact your family." That it would teach you a lesson about how good you had it at home."
"A lesson," I repeated, disbelief coloring every word. "You thought abandoning me in a foreign country with no money would teach me a lesson."
"I was drunk,"
he exploded.
"My friends were egging me on. You were embarrassing me in front of them."
"I embarrassed you," I said flatly. "Telling you not to drive drunk embarrassed you."
"It wasn't like that."
But his voice lacked conviction. Costas emerged from the house, his presence quiet but firm beside Maria. He didn't speak, but his support was palpable. "These people," I said, gesturing to Maria and Costas, "picked me up off the road when I collapsed from exhaustion. They didn't know my name, didn't speak my language, but they cared for me. They gave me purpose, family, a home."
"I'm your home,"
Daniel said desperately.
"I'm your husband."
"You're my husband," I agreed. "But you were never my home." Daniel tried another approach.
"Fine. Okay, I get that you're angry,
but we can fix this. I've changed. I've realized what I lost. We can go to counseling. We can—" "No," I said simply. "No? Just no? Samantha, this is our life, our home, our future." "It's your life," I corrected. "Your home, your future." It took being abandoned on the side of the road to realize I never had a place in it. He stood there, expensively dressed among the olive trees, and I saw him for what he was, a man so accustomed to control that he couldn't comprehend a world where he wasn't the center.
"I'll fight the divorce,"
he said, his voice taking on its familiar commanding tone.
"I'll get everything. The house, the money, me all of it."
"Fine," I replied calmly.
"Take it all."
My response clearly wasn't what he expected.
"Everything? You're just going to give up everything?"
"I'm not giving up anything," I said. "I'm choosing what matters." I looked at Maria and Costas, who stood by me despite understanding only part of the conversation. I looked at the grove where my hands had helped bring in the harvest. I looked at the house where I'd found peace. "This is what matters," I said. Daniel stood there for a few more minutes, as if waiting for me to change my mind. When I didn't, he turned to the car, then looked back one last time.
"You'll regret this,"
he said.
"When the novelty wears off, when you realize you gave up everything for this, you'll regret it."
"Maybe," I replied honestly. "But I don't regret finding myself." He got into the car, and I watched the BMW disappear in a cloud of dust, taking the last tether to my old life with it. Maria placed a hand on my shoulder, saying nothing. Costas gave me a nod with that rare approval I'd come to cherish. "Home," Maria said simply, pointing to the house. "Yes," I agreed. "Home." I sit on the same veranda where I first found peace, watching the sun set over our expanded olive groves. My Greek is fluent now, my hands are strong, my spirit at peace. This morning, a letter arrived from my lawyer. The divorce is finalized. Daniel got the house, the cars, most of the money. I got freedom. Maria calls me for dinner. She still insists on cooking for the three of us, though I've long since taken on my share of household duties. Costa sits at the table, reviewing plans for new irrigation equipment to expand the farm. They've brought me in as a full partner in the business. My interior design skills, it turns out, translate beautifully to planning efficient farms and beautiful spaces for agritourism. Sometimes, I think about the woman who stood on that French street, abandoned and broken. She thought her life was over. She didn't know it was just beginning. Daniel thought he was teaching me a lesson about dependence. Instead, he freed me to discover who I really was. And for that, despite everything, I'm almost grateful. Almost. A phone call interrupts my thoughts. A familiar number, my sister in Boston. Samantha? It's Lisa. I've got some interesting news about Daniel. I smile, answering the call. Some stories have a way of coming full circle, and I suspect mine isn't quite finished yet. But that's a story for another day. Did you like the story? Write your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next interesting story. See you tomorrow.